Okay, cool. This is the same Google Hangout that we were already in right before, after I made the changes. So you didn't close it?
No.
Okay, cool.
I mean, yes, it's the same. No, I didn't close it.
All right. So I set this up, and then quick sound check, and then we're rolling.
Oh, I should turn a timer on.
Are you going to run a timer on your phone?
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense.
Oh, God, I have to find the timer. Timer. No, I don't want a timer. I want a stopwatch.
Just all this stuff. So I'm gonna run the prompter from here. And once you get into it, I'm just gonna close it. Do you need me to keep scroll up or anything for the questions, or you have everything?
Mm-hmm.
Right, cool. Chairs in the way.
Oh, do you want to check what their things look like before you?
The could you just click each person?
Yes.
That's all right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
There.
All right.
Rebecca.
Yeah.
Could you just sit back just a little bit?
That good?
That's perfect.
Okay.
This looks so stupid.
What, the mic?
Yeah, because this shirt is like not. I forgot I had to be mic'd, so the
Yeah.
shirt is like pulling.
Just watch your hair.
Hair.
I mean, I don't think it's going to go anywhere near it, but.
Whatever.
Could you talk more?
The 1960s was arguably the most fascinating time in the world of space. Okay, so just to give you guys a heads up, the first question I'm going to ask, and I think I told all of you this, but if I didn't, is I'm just going to ask you guys to talk about what you do, because as I said to at least one of you, I don't think your titles totally encapsulate everything that you do very well, because everyone is very diverse experience and history. So just a quick, like, this is what I'm doing now. Rebecca, this is where I came from, which is relevant. So any experience that is relevant to this conversation, you can just sort of throw out there. And then the first real question we'll go to is the big kahuna of what happened to the enthusiasm for the space program.
Okay.
So, and what I'll usually do, just to avoid everyone talking over each other, is when I ask a question, I'll direct it to one of you. And then after that initial person answers, feel free to jump in and say whatever you want, and I will try and keep up with switching back and forth with who's on screen.
All right, we're good.
Okay, give me one quick second. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for the technical difficulties.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. How close is my hair?
It's pretty close.
So
Is there any? Is it going to be?
No, that'll be uncomfortable. So I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Just be careful.
I think it's pretty far, right? It's not going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not going to have the headphones on the whole time.
Okay.
But I think. I just need one sound check really quick.
Sorry, I just hit the mic. The 1960s was arguably the most fascinating time in the world of space.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to roll that, and then we're just going to run that.
Okay, so we're rolling, we're recording on every front, so we're good to go?
Yep.
All right, so we're going to get started in, now.
Right now, yeah.
So basically I'm just going to do the intro, and then I'll introduce you, and then we'll go right into the bios, and I'm going to start, because you guys are left to right on my screen, I'll start with Elizabeth. Oh, can I go?
And when you introduce them, just try to click on their name.
Okay, all right, I don't know what order they're in. All right. So just one last warning, if you happen to screw up or stutter or whatever, don't worry about it, just keep going like you would in a normal conversation. All right. The 1960s was arguably the most fascinating time in the world of space. Sputnik had just been launched, and the entire decade ended with the first moon landing. So what happened? Despite surges in enthusiasm during the Mars rover landing and flashes of obsession with superstar astronauts on the ISS, that excitement has waned in generations born after the space race. In certain circles, the final frontier is revered as the next great Wild West, but it's barely discussed by the general public. The big question is, can future generations ever be as excited about space as past generations? I'm ECN editor Casey Panetta, and on our panel today are Rebecca Spike Kaiser, Director of International Science and Engineering at the National Science Foundation, Elizabeth Bierman, President of the Society of Women Engineers and Senior Project Engineer at Honeywell Aerospace, and Mamta Nagaraja, Science Communications and NASA Mission Directorate. Okay, so one thing I do want to note I'm really, really excited about is this is our first all-female panel, and I'm really excited to get into it. So we're going to start with just having everyone talk a little bit about your backgrounds. Everyone has a pretty interesting history, and I think it really will speak to why we're having you on the panel. So Elizabeth, if you want to just take it away.
Yeah, so thank you. My name is Elizabeth Bierman, and like Casey said, I'm a senior project engineer at Honeywell Aerospace here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I work on commercial aircraft. My background is in aerospace engineering. I got my bachelor's degree from Iowa State University, and I did that because when I was a child, I was fascinated with space. So I look forward to this conversation. And then I would say my other job right now is I am serving as the president of the Society of Women Engineers, and our mission is to encourage young girls to go into the field of engineering and pursue a wonderful career as an engineer too. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to this conversation.
Great. Mamta, if you want to go ahead.
Absolutely. So my name is Mamta Nagaraja, as Casey said, and I work over at NASA. And now I'm at headquarters working in science communications. But prior to that, I worked over at NASA Johnson Space Center after completing my schooling in both engineering and science, in molecular science in particular. And I worked there training the astronauts and working in mission control, so more technical work. And now I not only do science communications, but I also lead the Women at NASA project at NASA. So I too am looking forward to this panel and the all-women panel too.
Thank you. And then, last but not least, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I actually got my PhD in international relations. So I am the non-technical person on this panel. I'm pleased to be here. I did spend more than 15 years at NASA, and I started at NASA in international studies, international relations, and then I moved on to various positions in policy. I just moved over to the National Science Foundation, where I'm leading the International Science and Engineering Office, and we're dealing with all of the international collaborations that the National Science Foundation has around the globe.
Cool. So as all of our viewers can see, we have a really, really interesting and diverse panel, and everyone has different experiences. So we're just going to launch off with the big kahuna question of what happened to our enthusiasm for space exploration? And Rebecca, I'll have you lead off.
Well, our enthusiasm is growing. It's still there, and it's just a different type of enthusiasm. I think a lot of people think of the space program in the past. As you said, they think about the Apollo era, and they think about the moon voyages. And that was the era where the only actors, really, who went into space were government actors. And think about the 1960s. Think about technology in the 60s. You were lucky if you had a television. Your television was black and white. Very few of us had access to other types of technology at all. My grandmother still called her car the machine. And now we're in 2015. We have a completely different relationship to technology. I'm sitting here in my office. I have my iPad, my iPhone, and my computer going on at the time. We have CubeSat missions, small missions that can be controlled by someone's iPhone that go into space. So our relationship with space is different, and it's something that's going to continue, and it's going to grow into the future. It's just going to be a variety of actors: government, non-government, private, large, small, And to me, that's a really wonderful world to live in.
Okay. So Elizabeth, if you want to sort of tackle that very broad question.
No, I think Rebecca's right. I think we are now looking at it at the space industry in a much broader sense, and there's so many different components to it, and there's a lot of different players. Also, when the 1960s, there were two players. There was the United States and there was Russia, and now everyone across the globe is working together to develop what that next, big thing is going to be into space. And so not only do you see, all of the companies in America going global, but now the space industry is going global. And I think it's fascinating for us as a country, but also as a world, to say, what is that endeavor going to be? And so we have the opportunity to encourage young children to show them what that opportunity could be and how we can all work together. So it's not just going to be what the United States is going to do, but really what the world is going to do in terms of the space industry.
Yeah, I think the global collaboration aspect of it has grown so much. It's really interesting to see, like, on the ISS, like, you really can't have politics there. Like, you just have to sort of do what you need to do and just get it done.
That's right, and look at the a number of countries who are interested in space. We have India that just flew this incredible Mars mission, and who would have thought of that, right, 20 or 30 years ago? We have smaller countries who are involved in space through experiments, flying small satellites, all sorts of things. And so we, I think, just have a different viewpoint and a different paradigm of what space exploration is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just different, as Elizabeth said, from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And Mamta, if you want to answer the original question and then add whatever else you have to say.
Absolutely, and I'm right in line with what Elizabeth and Rebecca both have said. The only thing I'll add, a couple of things. I think it's also a matter of how we measure the metrics by which we say, are people excited by space? And I think back when it first started, a lot of that, as Rebecca alluded to, was the technology by which people got their information was largely the news, either on the radio or the television. But if you look at it today, people are communicating in a completely different way. So if you turn back to the new ways of communicating, social media, you'll see a lot of excitement and a lot of chatter on Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and Tumblr and these different areas where people are talking about space. And it's really that demographic, that young 20s, 30s, even 40-year-olds who are still talking about space, and that's largely the demographic we think are no longer interested in it. But it may not be on our news channels, on our radios, but it is in the new way that people communicate. And I'll tell you where I actually think, so I used to fall victim to saying, oh gosh, I wish I had been alive during the Apollo era. I wish that I had seen the moon landings, because to me that is one of the coolest things, and I wasn't alive then. For me, it was the space shuttle program, which in and of itself had a large impact as well. But I'll tell you when I realized that I was incorrect in thinking that people had lost interest in space, and it is when I started going out to schools. And if you go to a school and you are talking to a group of 10-year-olds and you tell them you work at NASA, they don't care if you're an astronaut or not. You said the magic word NASA, and they are so interested. Their hands are up in the air, waiting and hoping you will ask them what they want to say about space. So I think the excitement is still there. It's just where we look for it.
Yeah, and if I could add to what Mamta said, I was just looking back. I teach a university class in space policy, and one of my students just did a project on Apollo. And he found some research that said that the support rate for Apollo was actually not as high even as we thought it was at the time. Between 40 and 60% of the population in the 1960s thought that we were spending too much money on Apollo. So a lot of this and what we characterize as excitement for the space program, maybe we kind of have more of a sense of nostalgia for how wonderful it was, if you know what I mean. It was a great achievement, but we had a divided view of space in the 60s. And now I think we actually have a more diverse and excited view of what space exploration is all about.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go back to Mamta for a second because you brought up kind of school outreach. So, I mean, to that point, how do you think we need to be encouraging future generations? And I know you mentioned, outreach from NASA is a really big thing. So what other ways do you think are effective?
And I think we're doing them already. When I say we, I mean NASA, but there are other entities also doing them. Journalists like yourself, for instance. So I think one of the ways to reach them and the new generation is communicating in the way that they communicate. So it's what I said before, we can't go to the radio, we can't go to the TV all of the time. We should keep those in play because there's still a large population looking at those venues for their news, but we also have to be able to communicate in the new ways. And I think NASA has created in the last few years a very strong social media platform, and so they're reaching those people through this new way of communicating. And it's not, and I think one of the older ways of doing it is sending a person to schools, and there's a lot to be said about sending somebody physically to a school. People still, I think human interaction is still very important, even though we're moving towards a social media type of world, if you will. But there are still a large number of people who respond to being able to see somebody in person and actually get to talk to them, shake their hand. So I think keeping that is important as well, but also evolving as society evolves. And I think we're finally catching up to that. We're saying, oh, that's not how people are speaking anymore. Let's go and find out how they are talking to each other and how do they get their news, and let's start expanding the ways we communicate.
Yeah, I have to admit I do follow/stalk the ISS astronauts on Twitter because the pictures they put out are just incredible.
It is incredible. I absolutely agree. Visuals are important, Casey. You just hit on something I think is very important. I think visuals, people love images. So we're just about to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Hubble, and I think Hubble may be one of the things we can go back in history and point to as creating this excitement over images, being able to see the sky in a way we've never seen it before. And then that continues on with the space station sending their wonderful pictures taken by real people who tweet them out really from space. I mean, that's just really cool.
So Elizabeth, I know the Society of Women Engineers does a lot of outreach and works, I mean, particularly with obviously female engineers. But what would you say is the best way to kind of get kids excited if they're not excited, or even help them to get into a career if that's what they want?
So a lot of research shows that if you ask a young person right now what they want to do when they grow up, they're going to say they want to help people or make a difference in the world. And so again, what a great opportunity to show them how space exploration does eventually come back and help us have a better world. And so a lot of the technologies that we have learned over the past few decades from space exploration are things that we take for granted day to day in our lives right now with the technology that we're using. And also what we're able to learn from the International Space Station with the astronauts on there aboard now, and the experiments that they're doing, that we're able to then bring back down to Earth and say, look, this is going to make a positive impact on our world. And so I think that's a really great thing that we can be doing to let this younger generation see all the great things that we're doing and how they can get involved and really do make a difference in the world with this type of career path, if that's what they want to do.
And then Rebecca?
Mamta and Elizabeth have pointed to so many wonderful things, and I think something that you see in both of their statements is the importance of connecting with people. Now we have a great opportunity with so many different types of people going into space exploration, and so much opportunity for space exploration to help people themselves to communicate out that this isn't about the machine. This isn't about the rocket. As my former boss used to say, those rockets don't build themselves. It's about the people. And if you look at the success story, for instance, of the Mars rovers, and how many people follow the Mars rovers online, why did they do that? Number one, because NASA did a wonderful job at showing the people who developed that mission, and showing the risks, struggles, and real human beings working on this stuff. And second, people identified, almost personified those rovers themselves. They got to be personalities, they got to be characters. And I think there's a real lesson to be learned in that as we get to exploration. We have to focus on the fact that people connect with other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good follow-up to that is if we're talking about getting younger generations interested, I think a follow-up conversation, particularly with this, has to be how are we getting girls interested in it? You know, it's a kind of notoriously gender biased. That's not the right word, but you know, the gender ratios aren't quite, you know, they don't really match the enthusiasm you might see in a group of kids who are younger. So, Elizabeth, just from, you know, you're an aerospace engineer, and what has your experience been, and what do you think that either female aerospace engineers or other women in the industry need to be doing?
Well, you know, it's kind of going back to what Rebecca said. So it's people wanting to work with people, and putting my engineer hat on, I think the perception in the community and society is that engineers are, you know, in front of a computer, not really working with other people. And if you're, you know, like an extrovert, or if you're a very, you know, personable person and you want to be out there working with people, helping them, trying to make a difference, they don't look at engineering as that way to go. And so we have the ability to, I would say, get out there in different communication channels. I mean, I think face-to-face is the best, but, you know, utilizing social media and other ways to show them the great things that engineers are doing, especially, again, in the aerospace sector, which, you know, where I work, because we are doing wonderful things. And again, it comes back to, how does the society know of all these great things that we're doing? Everything in the world today is touched by an engineer, and I think everything in space exploration that we're doing today just isn't in the day-to-day world of society. So we could just let that be known better through communication, through showing the role models. I think what, you know, NASA and, like you said, the International Space Station, what they're doing through Twitter and Facebook and NASA TV is amazing. You know, and I think, you know, the young kids are excited about that. And if we can keep that energy and that excitement going as they start to go into middle school and high school and pick their career fields, then we have a better chance of them, you know, considering it. And then also, they have to have a job when they're done. So allowing the public sector to get involved, allowing NASA to get the funding that they need, allowing the National Science Foundation to have the funding that they need to be out doing these great projects, so then they can hire these individuals that want to be working in this industry, I think is very valuable as well.
Okay. So, Mamta, you also have kind of an interesting, you know, perspective on this. So what would you say we need to be doing to encourage young girls, or, you know, girls looking to pick a college major to pursue this?
Yeah, and I think Elizabeth hit on it briefly when she said role models. I think role models are important. Being able to see people like you, and we know this from research on human psychology, that impacts where we think we can be. So if we look out into a room and nobody in that room looks like us, then we automatically think, oh, I guess this isn't a job for people like me. So I think role models are very important, even if that role model doesn't go out there and speak directly. And I also agree with Elizabeth that that's very important, that we actually do go out and speak. But even just having role models where people can look into a group and say, oh, yeah, anyone can do this, and it's very diverse. And I know at the government level, we're very conscious of making sure we show the diversity within government, and there's quite a bit of diversity in the government, but also in our private sector. I think that's really important for people and young people to be able to see that they have a place anywhere they want to be, and that really depends, to me, on role models, being able to see it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of interesting because it's a topic, we've done a couple of these like STEM-oriented engineering labs, and also it's a topic I cover a lot, and I can't believe how much just mentoring, like every single person I talk to, you know, they express the importance of being able to see, you know, if you can see yourself in it, then maybe you'll have more interest in it. And Rebecca, I think we skipped you.
No worries. I agree. I also think we have to think about how we teach STEM subjects. And there's been a lot of work on this, and there's some wonderful innovative programs. For instance, Arizona State has redesigned their engineering program so that they focus a lot more on team building, on integrating in things like humanities, critical thinking, into engineering, into bringing in people who wouldn't necessarily consider engineering from an early age, but it's because most of us really have no idea what engineers even do. So in the past, I think we as a society have kind of labeled folks as good at math, good at science from a very early age. And those who have been labeled as not good at math and not good at science, that get integrated in, and then they feel that they can't go into these subjects at all. I just spoke to somebody yesterday at the National Science Foundation, wonderful in public relations, a great writer. But you know what? She's also passionate about science and math, and she said she ended up at NSF because of that passion. And she was told that she wasn't good at math. And so she ended up not going into something like engineering, and probably would. So we have to think about how we deal with people, how we label people, and then also how we teach these subjects and make them more encouraging, more nurturing, and more inclusive of folks besides those who are labeled from an early age as good at math.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting too. We just visited a high school right near our office, and they offered for the first time this year an engineering class. And they were just blown away by the response because, you know, they had had maybe 3 or 2 or one girl volunteer sign up for their co-ed class, but as soon as they offered it as an all-girls environment, they got a crazy response. So, I mean, I think different teaching techniques really need to be looked at because, you know, if you tell someone they're not good at math, they're obviously not going to pursue engineering as a career, but, you know, you never know.
Well, that's right, and it's not something that's just on its own. It's something, engineering, as Elizabeth said, is integrated with so many other topics. We're solving problems. Yeah. And, you know, so if we can also, in our teaching, make those connections for students. So when we're teaching, you know, a biology course, we can connect it with engineering. You know, when we're teaching the English course, talk about it, how engineering can be related. Things like that, I think, would really help.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And I just wanted to say, so I have 2 daughters, and they're 9 and 7, and so in their school, in their kindergarten class, they build birdhouses. And so they allow these children to build birdhouses, but instead of just going, okay, go build a birdhouse that you know, they ask them questions. Well, why does a bird need the house in the first place? Does it need to be up in the air, or could it be on the ground? And what kind of material would be great for the bird to have? And you know, making them think differently, and I would say outside the box. It's those critical thinking skills that they're starting them very young. That's engineering. And so again, they're going to grow up having this skill set that we label engineering, and they're not going to be unfamiliar with that or afraid of it because they're like, oh, that's just a different way of thinking on how to solve a problem. So I do think we have a great opportunity in our K through 12 education system to not make it so scary or foreign of what great possibilities could be.
Yeah, and actually in this class, she was talking about how, you know, even if, and I think this applies to your daughters as well, even if they don't go into engineering, they still have that skill set. It's not going to hurt them. It's going to be valuable no matter what their career choice is.
Correct. Yeah.
So one question I really am interested, not that they're not all interesting, but one question on a personal level, what got you guys interested in space? You know, what was the moment when you were like, I want to work for NASA, or I want to be an aerospace engineer? And Elizabeth, we'll just start with you.
Okay. So mine was in the 4th grade. I got a lunchbox, and on the lunchbox was a picture of an astronaut on it. And unfortunately, though, 6 months later, the Challenger accident happened. And instead of being discouraged, I really wanted to learn about the astronauts that perished that day. We did not have the internet then, so it was a little bit difficult, but I was able to look into their lives, and a few of them on board were aeronautical engineers from Purdue University. And I was in Indiana at the time, and so I was, you know, by now I was in 5th grade, and I said I was going to be an aerospace engineer. So I grew up really not knowing what that meant. I just knew that it was a path for me to someday be an astronaut, like I think a lot of kids think about. But that passion kind of stuck with me, and then I studied aerospace engineering at school. And then that really opened my mind and eyes to a wonderful career that engineering is, and that all the different areas you can go into. So yeah, that's my story.
And what about you, Mamta?
Yeah, so similarly, I was a little girl, as many of us came up with this option when we were so small. It's so funny. It's well before we even knew what any of this meant. And I didn't know what engineering was till I got in college, my junior year of engineering, truly. I was put on that path early on. And I'd say I owe my career path to my sister. There's 5 of us, but one of the sisters in particular herself was very interested in science, and she's 4 years older than I am. And so when she was in high school, she would come and bring these science experiments home that she was learning in school, and she would encourage the 3 little kids to join her. And so she really planted those seeds of asking the questions and the scientific method in me. And it was around the time that Sally Ride had launched into space, and so she had announced that she was going to be an astronaut, and I was the copycat little sister who said, well, if you're going to be an astronaut, I'm going to be an astronaut. And it just so happened she grew out of it, and I became obsessed with it, and that's sort of how I ended up where I'm at.
Very cool. And Elizabeth? Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca. We did Elizabeth.
I have a really weird story because I had never imagined myself being at NASA. I got a PhD in international relations and had thought that I was going to be at State Department, maybe teach international relations, something related to that. But I got a fellowship to do research in Japan, and as an obligation back to the government for the fellowship, I owed them a year of service. And NASA came knocking. They needed somebody in international relations who specialized in Japan, and that's what I did. Come and work the Japan desk for the International Space Station. And I said, sure. And it ended up then developing into so many different opportunities. And for me, I spent 3 years at the White House doing international relations in science and technology. I worked at different space policy jobs. So I just grew to love space so much through this happenstance of coming to work at NASA.
And just because I'm not entirely sure, what exactly is space policy? What does that entail?
So space policy overall is, in my view, what is the framework? What is the why behind our space exploration? Why do we do it? And can we write that down? So our space policy today, our national space policy at that level, was developed by the Obama administration, and it says, why do we explore space? We explore space for many different reasons. One of the main reasons is what goes back to 1958, the benefit of all humankind, and more specifically, it's for the economic benefit and the scientific knowledge and understanding of the universe that we get. And so we, in space policy, tried to take these I guess you would consider them complex concepts, and write them down in words that everyone can understand so that we understand why we're exploring and why we're doing what we're doing.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so actually, since I have you here, you kind of talked a little bit about more generally what we need to do to get kids interested, but I know the National Science Foundation obviously does a huge amount of things. So, I mean, could you just talk about either a couple that you think are the most interesting or the most effective?
Sure. One of the most wonderful things I think we do is we have undergraduate and graduate research fellowships, and you can propose to do a study anywhere in the world. If you're a U.S. citizen or part of a U.S. university, and you can make a proposal for that and be funded to go anywhere in the world to do research. And what a wonderful way to inspire undergraduates and graduates to pursue science and engineering is by that kind of experience. Something else that we do is we fund these large facilities, large telescopes all over the world. Our director is currently in Chile viewing some of the telescopes down there. And we provide that data and information from those telescopes, NASA, to the public, to everyone, and it helps inform all sorts of things. Inform this whole thing that just came out about dark matter and the fact that dark matter really exists in the universe. So that's inspiring in a whole different way. We provide this information that is so exciting in our viewpoint of everything.
So just to sort of get back to the main theme of this, what do you guys think are the benefits to a strong space program? Because right now we're talking about, getting Kims involved and building up the program and working with other countries and other, making it a public thing. So we've got corporations and governments and all these different things. What do you think is the benefit of having that type of program? And Mamta, I'll throw it out to you first.
Sure, and the benefit of having a space program, or what makes a space program strong?
I guess kind of both of those, but more like what is the benefit of having that space program be so, interconnected and diverse?
Yeah, so I think for me, one of the biggest benefits of having the space program, and Elizabeth hit on this a little bit earlier on how you make it relevant to the people, to society, and I think that is the benefits you have outside of launching the rocket. So a lot of the technologies that we design and we build, obviously the primary reason we do it is to get a plane into the sky or a rocket into space, but the offshoots you get, or the spin-offs as we call them, that you get from those that impact the general population, I think are one of the biggest benefits we get from having a space program. So all of that money that we funnel into the space program eventually in many ways does impact the general population in a positive way. So one of those, the example I love that resonates with me, just for people I know in my life, is the imaging technology from the shuttle era that eventually landed on breast cancer detection, so in mammograms, and that improved the technology there. So many people can relate. I mean, if you say that to a large group, at least one person in that group, unfortunately, probably knows somebody who had breast cancer, either their mom, their grandmother, their sister, their aunt. And there's a direct way to say, this is how we're improving. We'll be able to better detect and detect earlier because we've improved imaging. And that technology eventually landed to impact the general population. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits we have to putting the money into the space program, is not the space program directly, but the indirect benefits.
That's really interesting. I had no idea that was sort of the trickle-down technology there.
Yeah, some of them. Some of the technologies come from that, and that's just my favorite one because it can affect you very personally.
Okay, Rebecca, do you want to?
Sure. My view, and it kind of sounds way out there, but I'll say it anyway. We're at a unique time right now, I think, not just in America, but really in the world, where we have the development of technology, innovation, as well as the drive to go into space. And if we don't take advantage of it now, it might pass us by. So there's been no time in the past where we've had this relationship with technology such that we have so many people involved in space exploration. We've had a view of where we can go in space, and we've had these great entrepreneurs who are developing these companies who want to take us into space. So we got to combine that all together. We got to jump on this opportunity and take advantage of it and continue going and moving forward in space exploration. Otherwise, we might miss the opportunity.
And Elizabeth, what do you think is the benefits?
Yeah, and mine is really to kind of go on what Rebecca said. I look at this as a great opportunity with all the political unrest in the world and just the cost of going into space and how that is growing. This is one topic that I think we can rally behind as, a global community and help each other do amazing things. It's something we can agree to and help each other to really take that next step and discover the unknown. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and like Elizabeth said, Dan Golden, who was the head of NASA for quite a few years in the 90s, he was asked once, why is there such a high opinion of NASA? A lot of people might not know everything that NASA does, but most people have a generally favorable opinion towards NASA. And he said it's because space gives us all hope for the future. It's the one area of our efforts, right, where we think for the future and we don't necessarily think about all the problems in the world. We think about the excitement that there is and what we can discover. And I think that's a wonderful.
Okay. So kind of an interesting question for all of you. Obviously, there's a lot of pop culture that talks about space. You have like Star Trek and Firefly, which was a personal favorite of mine. And then there's Neil deGrasse Tyson and all of these sort of pop culture really popular figures. So I guess my question is, what are those beneficial, or are people seeing, Star Trek and then they go try and work for, NASA and they're like, well, you guys aren't working on like a tricorder, like what's wrong with you? So I mean, do you think there's a benefit to introducing to kids, like, they're seeing these things and then eventually figuring out that's not quite exactly what's happening, or do you think it kind of puts them on the wrong path? Why don't we start with Elizabeth?
I think they're hugely important. And I say that because it takes away the stigma of, oh, I'm not smart enough to do that, or I can't do that. It's that personal connection to what could be, a great opportunity for them to consider. And also, I think it helps because it makes them think of it differently. So yeah, Star Trek might be solving a problem that's way out there and might really be far-fetched, but again, internally, it's making them think differently. Oh, well, maybe if they tried it this way, or if they thought of it in a different way, maybe we really could make something out of it. And then just having that face-to-face, like, oh, I remember seeing him on, 60 Minutes, or I remember seeing him on a Google Hangout chat that I did. I think that helps the young generation be like, oh, I could think about doing this too. So.
That's interesting. Mamta?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's hugely important to have these public figures and the public support that they give to it. For, if no other reason, they can reach masses that we cannot reach. And that's just a fact of being a public figure. Their reach is so much wider than my personal reach could ever be. Even if I'm the one doing the technical work and doing the actual work, I'll never be able to reach the number of people that they do. I don't think it's a danger that we get kids interested in science fiction and Star Trek and things like that, and then they grow up thinking or realizing, oh, this is not what NASA really does. Because I think that realization will come. I think it's a natural realization to come as you age. You realize your reality becomes more accurate. But I think as a kid, it's okay to be imaginative and to think of things that may never exist. It's kind of like the famous painter, Dorian, I think, who painted like the trees blue, and back then that was, trees aren't blue, trees are green. And he said, well, why not? The world is the way I see it through my own eyes. And I think that's okay. I think that's a great attitude for kids to grow up with. And then their reality becomes more sharp as they age. And then they realize, oh, that's not what we actually do. But here is what we do, and that's still exciting. So I think it's really cool, actually.
Okay. And Rebecca?
Yes, space and our culture have really been interwoven throughout our history. And Willy Ley and Wernher von Braun, who are two of the founders of space exploration in the early 20th century, they were inspired by the books of H.G. Wells. Wernher von Braun explained his vision of what a space station could look like on a Disney television show. So there's always been this kind of interrelation, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I would love to see even more. I would love to see space exploration and people modeling really cool kids who are in space, in the space world. I would love to see that more on television and more in movies. Look at CSI and the impact it had right on forensics. I would love to see that kind of thing happen for space as well.
Okay. So those are all of the questions that I have, but what I would like to do is just go through and get kind of final thoughts from all of you. You all have such, very unique and diverse sort of backgrounds, but it seems like you're kind of all in agreement. But I would like to just kind of hear any final thoughts that you have to say, and we'll just start with Elizabeth.
So I would just end it by saying, what a wonderful opportunity we are right now with all the great things going on in space exploration. Consider it as a career choice. Learn as much as you can about it. Look into engineering and follow your passions, and I promise there's something that you can do within engineering to make a difference in this world.
Mamta?
Yeah, and I'll echo that by saying the best advice I ever got was somebody who told me, don't do anything just for the sole reason of, and in this case it was becoming an astronaut. Don't do it just for that, but do it because you enjoy it. Do it because you love it. And if you do that, then you'll end up happy. And I am so glad that I did not focus every single effort of my life just to become an astronaut, and then I don't get it and I'm disappointed and I'm unhappy with my life. Instead, I've done everything for myself and asked the right questions and sought mentors, and we have one of my biggest mentors on this call, and that's Rebecca. And I did, and all of that ended up me being very happy and still achieving my dream, at least as best as I could do it. So that would be my advice to anybody who's watching this: is do the things you're good at that make you happy, and everything else will probably fall into place. You just don't know it yet.
Okay, and Rebecca?
So there are many different ways of being involved in space exploration. There are many different types of engineers. Aerospace engineers, electrical engineers, biomedical engineers, et cetera, et cetera. So communications, international relations, all sorts of other careers, and have involvement in space. But even if you don't work at SpaceX, NASA, Lockheed Martin, any of these companies, I just want to convey that space is for everyone. Nobody owns it, and that's on purpose. We all should be involved in it. We all should follow it. It's incredibly wonderful and exciting, and we're learning more about it every day. So I encourage everybody to tune in, watch the cool images of Hubble, watch all the amazing discoveries we're getting back from missions like Kepler, and, go space.
Actually, you just reminded me. I do have one final question for you all. What is the best place that you would recommend people go to learn about space, or like your favorite place to go? And just, Rebecca, you can just, since you're already speaking.
Well, I have to put a plug in for NASA, nasa.gov, but the NASA social media is very cool. All you have to do is sign up for the Twitter feed. You get these amazing cool imaging all the time. It's awesome. So seriously, I'm not just because I worked there. It really is very cool.
Okay, and then Mamta, where would you send people? Obviously to NASA, but
yeah, and I think so I would definitely say NASA.gov would be a great platform to start from. But there's other great space-based magazines. Scientific American, and there's not even space-based, it's science-based. For the general person, of course, if you're more into pure science and Nature are great magazines too. But I think just for the general person, some of those space-based journalist sites are probably really good, like space.com.
Okay. And
well, I'm going to have to say you need to go to the SWE website, so the Society of Women Engineers. But no, in all honesty, if you're a young individual looking into engineering, we do have a large amount of information in terms of going into the engineering workforce, if that's something you're interested in. But for myself, I'm with Rebecca. I mean, NASA TV is amazing to watch. I follow everything on social media for NASA and really get a lot of my information there too.
Well, you're not alone in that. I do that as well. But that's all for this Engineering Live. I want to thank all of our viewers and, of course, our esteemed panelists. And thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're good? Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I have no idea how long it was because even though I had the timer next to me, I never set it. I think it was about 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
It's about 40 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Because I was like, I don't want to take up too much of everyone's
Maybe a little
time.
less, but
Yeah,
no,
all
that
right.
was good.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for all of your time and enthusiasm, and I'll send out a sort of wrap-up email with all the reg pages and everything. You can tweet about it, and then I also want to open it up. I think I can stop recording this. Alex doesn't need to